Good morning and welcome to our final press conference of AGU23. This is Change and Resilience Under Fire in Ukraine's Agricultural Landscapes. Today with us we have online from Kyiv, Natalia Kusul from the National Technical University of Ukraine. We have Elena Melnik from ETH Zurich, Leonid Smilo from the University of Maryland, and Sarah Hartman and Irina Dronova from the University of California, Berkeley. And we're going to start with Natalia online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am Natalia Kusul from Kyiv Polytechnical University. Right now I am in Ukraine, and today we had 5 air alarms. Please, next slide. I work in the biggest technical university of Ukraine, National Technical University, Kyiv Polytechnic Institute, and also during 25 years I have been working in Space Research Institute in the Department of Space Information Technologies and System. Next slide, please. Our main expertise related to satellite monitoring, remote sensing, different application of this. We develop machine learning methodology for land cover, land use, change assessment, and different applications of geospatial intelligence. And today I will talk about how our research is used right now to monitor situation in agricultural sector of Ukraine during the war, and how the international support, international money, European money, reached to our farmers. Next slide, please. We have developed the methodology of land cover classification and crop type classification, which allows to assess the areas of different crops, and every year we deliver a crop map for Ukraine, which contains about 20 different classes, so we can recognize more than 10 different crops and other land cover types. Overall accuracy of our map is more than 90%, and it is very good accuracy. And we deliver such a product every year. Next slide, please. When war started, we adopted our technology to estimate the influence of the war to agricultural sector. And according to our assessment, about 20% of agricultural area were occupied when big war started in 2024. Right now, in total, about 5.7 million of hectares of Ukrainian agricultural lands are under the occupation. Next slide, please. And a lot of fields are directly damaged, and we have improved our technology to estimate the direct damages on the field, such as craters from bombing, traces from heavy vehicles, and so on. So in the right picture, you can see that in blue, the results of the recognition of damages in the field due to the military actions. Next slide, please. Right now, we have a technology which allows us every 2 weeks assess which fields were damaged during that period. And here in the picture, in different color, we show the fields that were damaged in different time periods during this big war. Next slide, please. Till now, about 1.4 million of hectares of fields are directly damaged in Ukraine. And in red color, we can see that territories which are mostly damaged, The deep red demonstrate the mostly damaged areas. So in this picture, we can observe their front line of the war. Next slide, please. And using this technology, we can compare the croplands and fields which were cultivated before the war and which are not cultivated during the war right now. So comparing the cropland area in 2022, comparing 2021 when war was not started yet, we can see that about 10% of cropland are not cultivated when the war started. Next slide, please. Comparing, okay, the second one. When we compare the cropland area to this year with before the war time, we can see that about 12% of cropland is not cultivated, and at the same time, the area of cultivated land increased in western and central part of Ukraine. Next slide, please. It has big influence into Ukrainian agricultural sector and also to the food security in the world, because Ukraine, before the war, was one of the biggest exporter of oil crops and provided was one of the biggest exporters. And right now we need help itself, and European Union provide a program for to support producers of agricultural production in Ukraine, and they pay $50 million to the producers according to this producer support grant program. And here in the picture, we can see in blue the fields and the producers who receive support from international donors, and in yellow who don't cover it by the program. And this our monitoring allows to estimate that our farmers are suffered from the war very much, and we can see some not very big but better efficiency of agriculture in that fields which are supported by this international program. Next slide, please. We provide this monitoring in cooperation with our international partners because Ukraine has big territory and we need cloud technologies for big data processing, and European Union supported us with cloud platform, cloud technologies for our computations. And we do this monitoring in cooperation with World Bank and Joint Research Center of European Commission, and with our partners and friends from University of Maryland and NASA Harvest Program. Next slide, please. That's all what we do now, and I hope that our research will help to assess the real situation in agricultural sector in Ukraine. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello, my name is Leonid Chumila. I'm a PhD student from University of Maryland and NASA Finest Fellow. I want to present the work that we made in University of Maryland with NASA Harvest team and in collaboration with our Ukrainian partners, Natalia Kusul, Dr. Andrei Shelostov, Dr. Prishepov. So we want to start. Yes, clicker not working. So we want to start with the studies that we made about Emerald Network in Luhansk region. So first of all, Emerald Network is an ecological network made up of areas of special ecological interest to conserve rare European flora and fauna. So Luhansk region was partially occupied by Emerald Network, and the warfare separated Emerald Network in two parts and separated it from Ukrainian policies and legislation. As a result, we can see that after 2014, the areas that were separated by the front line and buffer zone had significant deforestation, while the areas that continued, where Ukrainian policies continued working, had increased this forest area. So we made the study from 1996 to 2020 to analyze how implementation of Emerald Network and Berne Convention policies impacted the areas and its resilience to the war. And we found out that from 1996 to 2000, before the implementation of Emerald Network policies, both areas had significant deforestation. After implementation, it reversed trends to reforestation. And after separation of Emerald Network, part of Emerald Network by the buffer zone, we see that Ukrainian part continued reforestation, while part that was separated had serious decline in forest area. This work was made with our Ukrainian partners Natalia Kuso and Andriy Shelistov and was published recently in the Nature Portfolio Journal, Communication, Earth and Environment. Our next study is artillery rockets craters detections based on the very high resolution satellite images. So we mapped totally 33,000 square kilometers of very high resolution Maxar satellite images with 30 to 50 centimeters. And we detected 2.5 million artillery and rocket craters on the front line. So we also studied how these rocket shells are distributed on agriculture fields. We studied 81,000 field boundaries, and we found that 1.21 million craters are located in the cropland areas, and in average, each field has from 15 craters to 3 craters minimum. Many fields can contain over 1,000 fields, 1,000 craters. At the same time, the minimum detected crater area is 10 square meters, while average crater area is 74 square meters. It's seriously impacting cropland production in Ukraine, and especially sunflower production. So Ukraine is one of the most significant actors on the global oilseed market, and the most production of oilseed located in southern regions of Ukraine. And after the war started, the area of sunflower plants decreased to 5%. At the same time, because of occupation of southern parts of Ukraine, Ukraine tried to compensate its oilseeds production by moving the hotspots of sunflower areas to the central regions. And as a result, this loss of sunflower fields that are located on the conflict area and occupied area did not impacted not so seriously the production of sunflower. If we're talking about winter wheat production, 22% of Ukrainian wheat was harvested on the occupied areas, and it's in total can be assessed as $1 billion harvested winter wheat on the Russian occupied territories by Russian Federation. It's very hard to say, well, it's not hard to say what happened with this wheat. It disappeared from Ukrainian economy and was transported, legalized by Russian Federation and or sold in inside market or like international markets. interesting fact. So only within collaboration with Ukrainian partners and with Ministry of Ukrainian Agriculture, um, NASA Harvest produced the results for occupied areas. And you were talking about the total wheat production in Ukraine. A lot of forecasts from FAO or USDA were very pessimistic, but Ukrainian agriculture appears to be much more resilient to the war, and Ukraine was able to collect much more wheat that it was forecasted. So we're working with Ukrainian Ministry of Agriculture, and satellite monitoring was already adopted into their official statistics. And the number for 2023 will include these numbers that will be released by Ministry of Agriculture very soon. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Elena Melnik. I'm a senior researcher at AGU Zurich and associate professor at Sumy National Agrarian University from Ukraine. So today I'm going to tell you about our project on assessment of damages and ways to restore agricultural lands in Ukraine. This project is a collaborative effort of Sumy National Agrarian University and Royal Agricultural University from Great Britain, with partnership with AGU Zurich. And this project about soil restoration and how to assess damages. So as you know, 1/3 territory of Ukraine have been damaged by raw hostilities. And this is the size of an average European country. And Ukraine, I would say, currently experiencing the worst environmental disaster from the point of view of contamination per unit of time. And toxic elements such as lead, cadmium, titanium, cobalt, cuprum. This can leach from ammunition and weapon, and they can contaminate our soils, and thereby threatening global food security. And if contamination are not indicated and recorded in time, it can enter the food chain and can become cancerogenic for human. I would like to add that before the war, Ukraine supplied about 400 million people around the world with food commodities. And now spent ammunition and chemicals can contaminate soil for dozens of years ahead. Actually, on the base of these ideas, we created our project. So for now, our project has 4 different stages. The first stage is research. So we investigate the level of pollution. We train our future experts, and we next step is to map our country, especially polluted areas, and create networking. The first stage, specialists from Royal Agriculture University developed a protocol to assess soil damages and to assess how the war hostilities influenced soil health. We tested together with staff from Ukrainian University. We tested this protocol in Salisbury Plain in Ukraine, in England, sorry, and then we made some amendments. And after a series of international workshops that were conducted both online and in Switzerland, we made some amendments, and we and our colleagues from Ukraine, they bring to Switzerland 20 soil samples from 5 damaged farmlands, and we spread these soil samples among our partners from England, from Switzerland, from Ukraine, and we used cutting-edge laboratory equipment to assess contamination of the soil samples. And then we again made some amendments to our protocol. And after that, my colleagues from Ukraine, they conducted soil sampling in 20 farmlands, as you can see in north, and northeastern part of Ukraine. And we took 280 soil samples to understand the level of pollution and to understand. And sometimes we found a very high level of pollution. It was 3.35 times higher than maximum allowed level for that territories. Just a minute. So here you can see my colleagues, they conducted soil sampling. The territories very close to Russia border. And you can see the some of our craters, they were across the 25 meters in diameter. So then we assessed, measured the soil samples by using different methodics in the same time in England, in Ukraine, and in Switzerland. And now some of our soil samples have been processed in Poland to estimate the net concentration of heavy metals and mobile forms that can be absorbed by plants and can enter the food chain. And but we understand that territory of Ukraine is huge, and we need a lot of efforts to understand the scale of the pollution. And then we decided to provide training for Ukrainians. Our main target group was former soldiers and researchers from different research institutions around Ukraine. And we gathered together 26 people who would like to contribute to recovery of Ukrainian soil, and we provided comprehensive training for them. And we taught them how to take soil samples according to our protocol, and how to use remote sensing data, how to calibrate all this data. Because for some territories, we cannot use the soil sample because we don't have just access to the territories. So for that territories, especially the north part of Ukraine, we could use drones to estimate the level of pollution, and for still occupied territories, we can use satellite data to predict the level of contamination. So actually, now our idea is to create a network and to map the territory of Ukraine. And that 26 experts that I have mentioned, now they have been collecting soil samples around the Ukraine. And then we expect to put all this data together with the data obtained by our Ukrainian staff in the special dashboard developed by ARUP, especially for our project, where we want to get together all the information about soil pollution from different farms, from different communities. And this dashboard can be used both by our government, farmers, and probably investors, and they can get access to each farm and to understand the level of pollution. And we expect that we can create a network of international experts who would get access to the dashboard and understand the situation with this or that farm, and can recommend what remediation strategy can be applied for this or that lands. And then they can help to farmers to remediate their lands. So we do understand that a lot have been done because the territory of Ukraine is huge, as I have said. But the start has been done, and we expect that we will be able to create this network and leverage our efforts to help Ukraine to build back better and greener. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Hartman. I am a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley, and I'm also a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellow. Following the theme of using remote sensing and machine learning, I will be talking about an ongoing project that tracks agricultural resilience in Ukraine through a data-driven approach to map agricultural abandonment. This study aims to put the relative impacts since the 2022 escalation of the Russian war on Ukraine into perspective by examining longer-term trends and drivers of abandonment in the southern half of the country, which you can see in the top right. The escalation follows a dynamic history of conflict and agricultural change in Ukraine. This includes the dissolution of large-scale Soviet-era farms, post-Soviet era agricultural abandonment, and then recultivation in the early 2000s. What we ask here is, what can abandonment trends since 2011, following some of that recultivation in the early 2000s, tell us about the relative impact of this conflict on long-term agricultural resilience? So what I'll present today are some of those early results. So focusing just on this recent escalation, our preliminary results find that roughly a 1/3 decrease in agricultural footprint has occurred by 2023, with decreases most pronounced in the conflict regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. If we dig a little deeper into where these changes are happening and when, potential abandonment, which we define as fields that were unmanaged for 2 consecutive years, were detected since the escalation along the frontline and conflict regions. In this left-hand graphic, you can see some of the romadas where the potential abandonment is most heavily concentrated. These areas align with administrative districts physically along the escalation's path. And further, these findings align well with recently published studies that focus specifically on the escalation. On the right-hand side, if we consider some of these longer terms of full abandonment, which we define as a somewhat more conservative definition of abandonment, in which a field is left unmanaged for 5 years after 1 year of cultivation, we can see that there has indeed been an increase in full abandonment in the agricultural fields by 2023. And especially this is occurring in regions where there was armed conflict at the start of the war in 2014 and 15. So understanding some of these longer-term trends of abandonment is important because beyond informing us about these emerging areas, it can also show us how these lands that are now potentially abandoned since the escalation could trend towards full abandonment if proper interventions are not taken. I want to emphasize that the lands detected as potentially abandoned since the escalation are still on the early onset of change, and early signs of abandonment do not necessarily mean full long-term abandonment, meaning that this could provide a window into needs for post-war recovery and where to focus efforts. Speaking of post-war recovery of the agricultural sector, I want to emphasize that not all agricultural areas across Ukraine are the same. The agricultural systems of the southernmost part of Ukraine, it was until recently irrigated water stored upstream of the Kakhovka Dam. As some of you journalists might remember, on June 6, 2023, this dam was indefinitely destroyed, cutting off vitally needed irrigation water in this arid part of the country. The dam was the primary supplier of irrigation for crops, many of which use a center pivot irrigation, which you can just kind of see artistically visualized on the right-hand side. And the destruction of the dam is causing great uncertainty for the future of the region. So in our preliminary analysis for 2023, we were able to confirm with satellite imagery that some production has occurred in this region, as seen as some of the green areas that are close to the black irrigation canals in the left-hand graphic. Some of the agriculture that was sown and harvested was likely done before the destruction of the dam itself. Meanwhile, large tracts of land that we would typically expect to be cultivated in this region, visualized here in beige, were not cultivated this past year. This specific case highlights that the vulnerabilities of long-term agricultural resilience are variable by region, with a single event such as the destruction of the dam potentially costing lasting damage for years. This case also highlights the compounding challenges of conflict and climate change. This region is the driest climate in Ukraine and therefore is highly dependent on stored water to get through the drier months of the growing season. While storage and metered release of irrigation water typically allows for continued operations through this dry region, without the dam, there is no such large-scale buffer that can help these crops grow to fruition. Further deepening this challenge, the fertile steppe of Ukraine is also getting drier. Researchers have projected by By the end of this century, almost the entire region will have a drier climate that necessitates irrigation water. Thinking to the future of the long-term recovery of Ukraine and Ukraine's agricultural sector specifically, what this points at is that investments, not just in the region that had the dam before, but also for the further northeast, will need it to be done to accommodate changing climate zones. Ukraine has an opportunity to plan for a post-war recovery that not only responds to the immediate impacts of the war, but also takes into account scientifically driven climate change projections. And finally, I want to reiterate that this analysis is still ongoing and looking at the longer term trends of this agricultural abandonment. So using the maps that we are finalizing now, we aim to understand the drivers of the spatial and temporal variation of abandonment that we see. For different areas, is this timing and the location of physical conflict the most statistically important driver of abandonment? Or by looking at these long-term trajectories, can we identify other underlying climatic, socioeconomic, or other variables that may be contributing to this abandonment? And how can we use this information to inform recovery? And I want to close by mentioning something a bit briefer, which is that as we as researchers around the world endeavor to understand the impacts of climate on the environment, there's still a great need for better sharing of methods, data, and networks between one another. And so it is for this reason that at this year's AGU, a group of scientists are excited to launch a new conflict in the environment network, also called SEEN, which we encourage academics and the like to enroll in at this QR code. So we have much work yet to do. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Irina Dronova. I'm an associate professor at UC Berkeley, and I'm very honored to collaborate with Sarah on the project that she has just presented. I'm also really grateful to all the speakers and for the organizers for this opportunity to share some insights at the end of this panel that are emerging from this work and from our experience in applying remote sensing to understand the emerging impacts. One important takeaway that we see is that satellite imagery, building time series of publicly accessible data provide a tremendous potential to support these efforts and to help us gain as best as possible an early understanding of these emerging impacts. At the same time, it's really important to understand that not all impacts currently have a landscape footprint that is easy to detect from space, but they have tremendous influence on the agricultural trade and on the dynamics of the land resources in Ukraine. Here I have some figures from the study put together by the experts from the Kyiv School of Economics in Ukraine. Early in April of this year, they estimated the total damage to agricultural and land resources to be around $8.7 billion US. But as we can see from that, most of this damage comes from agricultural machinery, about 4.7 billion, followed by grain storage facility damage, about 2.5 billion, and then infrastructure and appropriated products. All of these are likely to have huge impacts on the next step in Ukraine's agricultural relationships and exports, but they're not necessarily easy to detect from space. Furthermore, they tend to vary by region. At the same time, as we see from the work by our colleagues, there are also tremendous impacts on the landscape that are still difficult to monetize, and some of them may take years before we can reliably attribute them as, for example, signals of abandonment. These uncertainties are amplified by a number of other factors, one of them being the climatic and environmental heterogeneity of the vast Ukrainian landscape. Some crops, for example, can have very different signals as seen by satellites, depending on where they're grown, what their planting schedules are, what cultivars are being used specifically, and that can create challenges for detection. Not all remote sensing signals of change are actually agricultural shifts. Crop rotation, fallow fields can also look like change, but again, we can only understand whether they're really indicating shifts from previous practices by looking at longer-term timeframes. And also, there's a very dynamic agricultural market that is changing preferences for certain crop types. If we look at the bottom figure that shows the trends in 3 very popular crops in Ukraine since 1991, and the figures show changes in the planted area Ukraine-wide, we see this remarkable increase in sunflower planted areas. As Leonid pointed earlier, it's a very important crop, and Ukraine has been a leader in agricultural sunflower oil exports since 2012. At the same time, potatoes, very important crop, are not changing that much. And another popular crop, sugar beets, have been somewhat declining since that time. Again, these can also create certain patterns of change and shifts in different localities that may not necessarily be a signal of invasion, but also could be amplified or modified by that. These changes also interface with the trade-offs in remote sensing data. Historically, a lot of products that provide high temporal frequency, wide spatial coverage, are openly accessible through platforms such as Google Earth Engine, cloud-based interface, and very easy to process, come at coarse spatial resolution. It may be difficult sometimes to distinguish boundaries of individual fields or detect very pointed impacts of military attacks. Conversely, data sets that are of high spatial resolution still tend to be mostly commercially available. They often have lower temporal frequency, and they require additional efforts in downloading, processing, and storing them that really complicates the workflow. One promising data set that has been emerging is Planet Labs 3 and 5 meter high-resolution satellite imagery. They have made some of their products openly accessible for non-commercial educational and research use, but currently even those data still have to be downloaded and processed with additional steps compared to widely accessible coarser resolution data. And a lot of studies that focus on the impact of the war right now tend to look at immediate before and after timeframes, understandably, to eliminate various confounding factors. But again, some of the effects we can only see through longer-term timeframes. So with these insights, I'd like to highlight two really important research needs that we can work on together. One of them is that there is a really important need for validation, for robust on-the-ground understanding of the damages of their varieties and how they look on the ground and from space. It's not an easy effort given that the invasion is still going on, but it is not impossible. And through collaborations, we can work towards creating such databases. Some impacts, as Elena's work has shown, can only be manifested through the ground observations, but remote sensing analysis can help us upscale. And in the Sarah's work, for instance, students have worked really hard through manual interpretation of high-resolution satellite images to create more than 1,800 reference points for the analysis we're doing, and this effort is still ongoing. And lastly, once again, we really need comprehensive multitemporal analysis. Some parts of Ukraine have been feeling the impact of Russian invasion since 2014, since annexation of Crimea and establishment of separatist republics. So they have unique agricultural trends that may be different from the kinds of impacts we see in other regions. And again, through long-term remote sensing data archives and through joint efforts, we can explore this and we can have a more robust understanding of the impacts and the future. With that, thank you again, everybody, and thank you to the organizers of the conference.
Thank you so much, panel. So we're going to go to question and answer now. I think people in the room know the drill. Raise your hand. I bring you the mic right now. And if you're online, you have the Q&A box and we'll get to you as well.
Thank you very much. I'm Rich Stone, Science Magazine. I've been covering the war in Ukraine for Science. You didn't address landmines, I assume, because you can't visualize those from space, from satellite data, but what kind of extent of damage to croplands do you expect from landmines, and how important is that as an issue compared to the contamination from shelling?
Okay, I can answer. Olena Milnik. So I would say, for example, in my region, Sumy region, where I was born, about 40% of our lands have been mined. And we do understand that demining is not the agricultural lands demining is not the first issue for Ukraine, because it's not a priority. But the first, we have to demine our settlements and energy systems, and then agriculture only. But we have already been contacted by the Halo Trust, and today I will have a meeting with humanitarian demining organization, and we are going to unite our efforts to meet this challenge and to help our agricultural lands to prioritize which kind of lands should be demined the first, to organize the constant food chain supply.
More questions in the room for our panel here in San Francisco. And let's not forget Natalia Kusu, we have her still in Ukraine.
Hi, I'm Alex Witzy, a reporter with Nature. My question is for Irina. You were talking about the need to ground truth and validate a lot of this remote sensing work, and you alluded to it being very difficult. Can you just talk more about how you get that done? There was some notes on your slide about media reports, what's reliable, what's not reliable. Talk more about how ground truthing can happen.
Thank you. This is an excellent question. And I would like to add that one of the biggest challenges is also the balance between getting precise locations and compromising potential safety of people who are reporting them, especially in the areas that are still impacted by conflict. In Ukraine, for example, people are really hesitant to share locations on social media, or sometimes explicitly asked not to do so until way after certain events have taken place, and that is really understandable. What we're doing is we're exploring various media reports in Ukrainian and in English and in other languages that we're able to work with to see sometimes photographs of places that could be recognized, or sometimes some locations are explicitly described, and that can help create precise instances of certain attacks or events in agricultural and in other setting. Another method that has worked more efficiently so far is interpreting high resolution satellite imagery that is sub-meter pixel size, that is visually recognizable. And those kinds of data can be available through Google Earth platforms, or sometimes as a background imagery in ArcGIS. Some of it is relatively recent, and we can see, for example, craters or presence of destruction of infrastructure, roads, and other places. It means that we have to literally eyeball these images and, again, find places based on media reports, then scan and see where these events have taken place, and then we can understand the locations and the spatial footprints from that through visual interpretation. And then also, and for the early years, it's harder because, especially pre-war, to get a baseline assessment, but some information can be available by examining Google Street View imagery and historical high-resolution data. And I also would like to maybe give Sarah a few words, because she has been leading a team of students who have been really, really helpful with this effort and did a lot of heavy lifting.
Sure, thanks. And also in the spirit of creating this kind of collaborative network of academics, I would also love to open it up to the others who use satellite imagery as part of their analysis. One thing I do want to note is a lot of it depends on what type of phenomena you're trying to identify. And so Dr. Genova touched on this a little bit, but we as scientists are using different spatial resolutions, different temporal resolutions. Some phenomena happen like that. Other phenomena, let's say climate change, some of those effects can be observed over longer terms of time. So I hesitate to generalize the way in which we gather this information from on-the-ground sources, because it depends on what we're trying to track and whether it's a longer-term trend or a shorter-term trend. There has been some success in using social media reports, but again, that spatial granularity might not necessarily be there. Another question you might want to ask, and kind of the flip side of this, is once you have that data, at what scale is it actually relevant in the end? So is this going to be relevant at that highly spatial resolution, or is it actually most valuable to get that type of information at the city level, at the district level? So something that we do in our work is not only look at what's available, but look at what types of questions are relevant to ask at what scale. And in that way, try to pair what is available with also the types of end output that we're looking for. But at this point, I also would love to hear for those who are using other innovative methods for collecting on-the-ground data, what they might have found to be successful, and other lessons learned for other academics.
Okay, as far as we are going to measure sizes of craters to understand how can we scale up our efforts. For example, if we know the size of craters and which weapon it has been left, so we can predict what kind of heavy metals we can find out there. And then by using remote sensing data, we can scale up efforts and to help our government to map our country and to understand what efforts should be done on that these are the territories of Ukraine.
More questions?
So maybe this question is for Dr. Shamilo and Dr. Kusel. It sounds like the resiliency of Ukrainian agriculture was better than expected in the sense that you've been able to compensate, Ukraine's been able to compensate for sunflower production by shifting it further west and to the central and western part of Ukraine. Winter wheat was greater than expected. Is that generally, in your view, a good news story for Ukrainian agriculture? And is there any kind of downside? Is it supplanting other crops that these fields that are being sown with sunflower and wheat, has that had a downside impact on agriculture at all?
So I will start. If we're talking about sunflower, from one side, it's good that the plantation areas were shifted in the central regions, but we also have to keep in mind that sunflower planting is not very sustainable and it's affecting soils. And by Ukrainian legislation, sunflower should not be planted should be planted with crop cycle 7 years. It means if you plant in sunflowers this year, you have to wait 7 years to wait it. But more probably, a lot of farmers will not consider such crop rotation economically sustainable for them. That's why they will plant sunflower a few years in a row, and it will be bad for Ukrainian soil. If we're talking about, in general, agriculture resilience, from one side, Ukraine collected much more wheat than expected from international organization, but from another side, we have also to keep in mind that a lot of wheat was destroyed during Russian bombing, and Ukraine economy have a huge loss because of shelling of infrastructure, destruction of equipment, and even like farmers are risking their lives by collecting the yield, because it's like everybody expected much lower yield, much lower production, because a lot of areas are dangerous for farmers to collect their production. However, farmers were able to collect this production with, unfortunately, casualties of personnel and equipment, and it's also a big loss for Ukrainian agriculture. So it's like, it's not like there's only positive sides of these effects, but there's also a lot of problems and a lot of losses. Dr. Kusel, you want to add something?
Yes, maybe a few words. Our country faces not only with the problem of how to grow some crops, but how to keep it and how to deliver the commodities to the customers, because we have a lot of damages in logistics, and now the main way of export our commodities is also not safe, and we cannot deliver the grain to customers by sea. And right now we try to use trains and change logistics. So, of course, Ukrainian people are very strong and very straight, so they try to be resilient, but we face with a lot of different kinds of problems, which should be solved, should be addressed.
Nicola Cannon, Royal Agricultural University, Cirencester. On the issue of the cropping, as you rightly explained, there's rotational separation, which is good agricultural practice. And of course, something is displaced, as you alluded to. And if that's a crop like soybean, I think we know the consequences of where the soybean is likely to be sourced from for countries that would have been using Ukrainian soya otherwise. I think it draws on a lot of issues of the build back strategy for Ukraine after this, as we've heard about the wonderful resilient mentality that's going on and making everything happen. But I think as we go forward, we have to think about the reinvestment strategy and the type of equipment that is used in this, and some of the maybe constraints that will be given on that to ensure that the build back is better. It allows us to meet many of the strategic aims that we've been discussing at a conference like this about building soil organic matter, or trying to avoid soil organic matter depletion. So working with things such as no-till or direct drill for crop establishment. And I think that will become linked to green finance of the build back, and the same with how energy is used if in the build back of farms afterwards. So there's much greater implications, and we have to take as positive a step forward to make sure that we can reset and use this to influence the infrastructure in the future as well. Thank you.
And can I also add a couple of words to the previous? And can I add a couple of words? It's a pity exactly what is going on right now, because during the last 10, 20 years, a lot has been done in Ukraine to switch from the extensive Soviet agriculture to organic agriculture, and Ukraine have made like many care of good organic supplier. And it's a pity that now we can say again about the food security and how can we supply our nation with foods. So this is why I fully agree that we cannot get back to the previous standards. We have to build better and greener.
Yeah, hi, this is Alex Whitsey with Nature again. My question is for Natalia. You talked about some of the collaborations you're doing with EU, with the University of Maryland. What other international support do you need that maybe you're not getting right now? What more do you and your colleagues need in terms of connections, outreach, financing from the international community?
I can say that international support is very important. It's the most important what we have right now, and it helps us to survive. So many different countries during the war established the special scientific program and applied scientific program joined with Ukrainian scientists, focusing on the developing the strategy and methodology of recovering Ukrainian economy. And these programs support us very much, and we are very grateful for it. And I think it is such collaboration during the war, it is incredible for us, because Ukrainian, we try to involve into this cooperation our students, because they feel cannot find the word, but it supports us very much, and I think if such program will develop, it will be the best what could be done for Ukraine, because it will help us to renovate our science and give us the optimism and resilience how to stay in this war.
Nicola Cannon again. And we're working with Alina at SDAU, so SUNY National Agricultural University. I would say that money is obviously always a constraint. It was amazing that our initial pilot for all of this was funded by a private charitable donation. We have then gone on and secured other money, including from financial markets and Universities UK. But that's all been for the preliminary stuff. Now to scale this up, obviously on the ground, the more samples you take, the more cost. The more samples you take, the better information you have. The more samples you take, I'm an agriculturalist, I need a data management. We were talking yesterday about collaborating with University of Maryland and things like that. And it's brilliant that you're forming this collaborative network. And I was just signing up to it straight away. You know, we need to work together. We need to appreciate the skills. I have a different skill set to everyone sitting up there. I need their skills, and therefore we, you know, networks that you mentioned are vital for us to link together to form the power of collaboration to deal with this, and that takes finance. So thank you for your question, because it's a really important one.
I would like to add a few words. Recently, I saw an article that published in Nature that indicates that the war reduced scientific capacity of Ukraine for 20%. And Ukrainian scientists are working very hard to be resilient, to sustain what they have. But I believe that they need more help and they should be more integrated in European and global scientific networks. So they will be able not only to save what they had and continue their work, but like to improve to return like it will be essential to return to the post pre-war conditions and continue the sustainable development of scientific community in Ukraine. Because once again, it's right now in very dramatic conditions. It's lost a lot of scientific stuff. It's lost a lot of scientific capacity to sustain and to improve it. It requires a lot of effort that Ukrainian scientists right now are given the maximum effort. But I believe the scientific community of the world should be more acceptable and help to integrate the scientific community of Ukraine in the global research networks.
And can I add, I would say that, yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of people, researchers had to flee the country just to save their life. And then now, whenever they are, they're trying to create this network. They're very supportive. They're trying to create network with international researchers from around the world to support Ukraine. And as I do in Switzerland, I'm trying to attract as many people as I can to help Ukraine, to explain them. I give lectures, and the same do my colleagues from different universities. So it's only collaborative efforts. I would say that Ukrainian researchers are really very resilient, and they try to share information, what's going on in Ukraine, what's very crucial for now.
Irina Dronova, I just want to add a very brief comment to that as well. One thing that I find very impressive is that at the same time, the Ukrainian researchers who are in Ukraine are still trying to maintain their voice, and they're holding conferences in various regions and various universities while being constantly under air raids. Many of them have to switch to virtual format. I've recently participated in one such conference held by Kyiv Polytechnical University, which was very broadly themed, and they welcome international participation. They waive fees for international scholars contributing, or they ask to donate their fees to Ukrainian causes and things like that. And I would like to say that sometimes it's hard for them to share this. So our networks and our international collaborations can help promote those efforts. It's not very difficult to participate in such a conference on Zoom, but it would be also great if international researchers could come in and share their work, share insights, even if it's research not about Ukraine per se. Ukrainian scholars welcome efforts and opportunities to learn from how people are doing things elsewhere and how that could be applied to Ukraine. So that is another facet of it that I just wanted to highlight, and I'm happy to share the information that I know, but Western scholars could also come in, and other international scholars, and help participate there as well.
Do you have any last questions here in the room in San Francisco? Right, then I'd like to thank our panelists today. This has been recorded and will be available on AGU's YouTube channel. We'll also make the slides available on the Press Information Exchange for those who are registered press. Thank you all for coming. At 11 o'clock, we have a roundtable event with our own Becca Zombek here on dam removal. And this afternoon, NOAA will be holding a sort of workshop on the NCA 5 map project they've been working on. And finally, at 3:30, we'll have another dam-related roundtable, this one about beaver engineers. So we hope to see you there. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, organizers. Thank you, journalists, for amazing questions.